Awesome. So good to see you here. I'm excited for the work of homeschooling. Well, I'm excited to do this course with you. I'm not always excited to do the work of homeschooling, but that's why we need to do this kind of intensive challenge together, right? Because we really do want to do the work of homeschooling. It's just that in the moment me, the inner 2-year-old that complains about it, with our kids complaining about it at the same time, can cause a perfect storm of just not doing the work because there's just too much, it feels like, interfering with that actual deep-rooted desire. So as we work on the work of homeschooling together over the next 8 weeks, we are going to focus on consistency and talk about what consistency actually is and means so that we can pursue it better, build it into our plan better. And a lot of times we think of consistency primarily in terms of doing the same thing over and over again. And some people are really good at that, and some people struggle with that. I am more on the struggle end of that, but where we're just doing the same thing over and over. But we know that regularity is important. But there's also an older and I think more important meaning to consistency that will help us actually grow in regularity without getting bogged down in the daily routines, and really experience the satisfaction of a job well done. And so the older meaning of consistency is a little bit more in line with integrity. So if something is consistent with something else, it means that they go together, they're working together. So our actions need to be consistent with our beliefs, right? That kind of consistent, if the two are consistent, then they're both the same. So if we think about consistency in terms of acting out our principles, our beliefs, our goals for education, then I think we will more steadily and faithfully do the work of homeschooling, where we aren't aiming directly at doing the same thing all the time. That will come. That's kind of a piece of it, but that's not actually the end goal that we're aiming at. That's just one piece of the puzzle along the way. And the kind of consistency that we're actually aiming at is putting into practice the actions, the steps that are in line with, consistent with our beliefs about education, about family, about relationships. And when our aim is that kind of consistency, then if we do need to take a day off, we can be asking ourselves, or a day where we need to adjust the plan, those days happen. Like, am I being consistent? You have a measuring stick that's actually accurate in that case, that allows you to make a wise choice based on your priorities and not based on a standard of maybe comparing to others or comparing to the checklist. We need a truer standard to measure ourselves by, and that should be our priorities and our beliefs, our values about education and why we're homeschooling. Sometimes we will need to take a lighter day, or to emphasize only one thing that day, or to take a mental health day for everyone. And that can be in line with, consistent with what we actually want out of homeschooling. But then a lot of time, more times than that, when we ask ourselves, am I being consistent? What we're actually going to have to do is just show up and do the work, because it's like, no, to not start school right now, to procrastinate getting started, to procrastinate looking at their work, to just go do something else right now isn't actually consistent with my educational philosophy. It's just giving in to my own inner 2-year-old, or maybe my outer actual 2-year-old or 12-year-old. It's not that different, really. And so we are going to work on being consistent with our educational principles throughout the work of homeschooling, recognizing for the most part that's going to mean every day showing up to do the work of homeschooling, always keeping first things first, and to take a day or half a day and do something other than was planned. There is a way for that to be consistent, and there is a time where we do that inconsistently, where we are being inconsistent. But the standard of consistency is our underlying educational principles and goals. So we have to be clear on those to know if we're being consistent. And that is outside. Determining your goals, your vision, your principles, your philosophy is outside the scope of Work the Plan. Work the Plan is going to be the practical, like, how do we actually implement it? So if you haven't done any of that big picture thinking, I'm going to guess that you probably have done more than you're giving yourself credit for, because you can probably tell me why you're homeschooling. And that's the core foundational. That's going to be part of your core reason. And you can just start with that. It doesn't have to be completely researched and thought out and said in the perfect language to be there, undergirding everything we do. So just like with Work the Plan, if you've worked through that, I know not all of you have worked through Work the Plan, but this is a similar thing where Work the Plan doesn't say, here's a planner, we're going to use it. It says, it doesn't really matter what planner you use, you just need to have things written down and then you need to do them. And these are the habits that we need to have in place to put those plans into action, no matter what format you have it written down in. It's the same thing here with Work the Plan. Whatever curriculum you're using, whatever method you like to follow, however you have that laid out, if you're following something that's in the box, if you're making it up yourself, if you're using some mishmash of all the things, you need to have books of some sort and a plan of some sort to work it out. There are underlying practices and habits that apply to all of us, no matter our style of homeschooling, that help us get the work done. And that's what we're going to focus on practicing and building together in the work of homeschooling. We have to have a plan of what we're going to do written down, and then we have to look at it and do it. So whatever your homeschool plan says, whether someone else gave it to you or you made it up yourself, or whether it's just phonics and a short circle time because you just have 6 and under, or it's a full day because you've got people everywhere from high school to preschool. We all have a different list, but there are some core fundamental practices that help us all keep the main thing, help us keep track of what's actually going on, and do the work that we ought to be doing so that we could be faithful homeschoolers and not hit or miss homeschoolers. So that's our goal, is to grow in consistency with our underlying vision and principles, and consistency in faithfulness. Homeschooling is mental, intellectual, and emotional toil. Right? We have to be on and paying attention and thinking and praying and discerning and exercising wisdom to give our children what they need to take the next step that they need to take. That's the work of homeschooling, and that's what we want to be consistent in. And the more we are consistent in that way, the better checklists we can create for ourselves and our children. So we are not going to go in assuming that the checklists we start with we're going to keep the checklists consistent, as in the same for this whole thing. Probably not. We are probably going to learn about ourselves and our children and how we're working right now and adapt them as we go, because we're growing in wisdom and discernment and figuring out how to make this work for us and for our children.